Kayla, my dear, listen to me. Run. Run away from this house.
As my father-in-law's dementia progressed, he started yelling like this more and more frequently. I tried to calm him down by acting as if nothing was wrong, and that everything was all right. But my husband and mother-in-law would cast cold glares and colder words at both me and my father-in-law.
Could you shut the frick up, you old gas bag? You've lost your damn mind.
You're so pathetic. Well, no matter. We just have to hang on a little longer until everything will be all right. Any sensible person would immediately wonder what exactly she meant by that. But for now, calming my father-in-law down and taking care of him in general was far more important. One day, later on, I found a letter left by my father-in-law, who was apparently going to be hospitalized. When I unfolded the piece of paper and read what he'd written, I learned the truth, and I quickly ran out of the house as fast as I could. This is the story of how my husband was collaborating with my mother-in-law to do the unthinkable to me and to my father-in-law, and how his preparations and my willingness to act very quickly helped us expose the pure evil of the traitors. My name is Kayla, and I'm a 54-year-old part-time housewife. My husband, Percy, is 56 years old and works as a department manager in a locally successful company. We had been married for 30 years, and our 2 children, 1 son and 1 daughter, are now completely independent and have their own families. At our house, we are a family of 4, living together with my parents-in-laws, the Claptons. We used to live separately, but with old age comes the inevitable deterioration of the human body, and Mr. Clapton's legs and back eventually became weak enough to require some amount of nursing care. So, Percy and I decided to move in together with him and his wife to take care of him. Mr. Clapton had always been in good health and did not need nursing care, but after he remarried his current wife, his health began to further deteriorate, and small injuries led him to requiring nursing care. My mother-in-law, called Edith, is actually his second wife, and he married her 3 years prior to the beginning of when everything happened. Percy's own mother had died of an illness before we ever met, so I tragically never had the opportunity to get to know her and receive her blessing to marry her son. And my father-in-law had lived as a widower for multiple decades. Through an acquaintance, however, he met Edith, and after a rather nice relationship, married her. Aged 59, much younger than Mr. Clapton, and not that much older than me, Edith looks much younger than I do, with her flamboyant appearance and heavy makeup. At the time of his father's remarriage to Edith, Mr. Clapton seemed to be completely obsessed about his new, beautiful wife. But Percy was frankly not too happy about his father's remarrying another woman.
I can't let this happen, Kayla. This woman came into his life so much later than Mom and I did, and she's just gonna run off one of these days, taking half of Dad's inheritance with her.
What do you mean by inheritance, honey? Abraham is still in such good health. He's definitely got more than 20 years left in him. Indeed, after he remarried, Mr. Clapton went on trips with his wife and accompanied her on her outdoor hobbies, and he tended to push himself too hard for his age. This evidently took a toll on his physical body, and his legs and back started suffering from arthritis and physical stress. One day, Percy and I received a call that his father had been seriously injured on an outdoor trip with Edith. We rushed to the hospital, and we found that he had suffered a broken femur. The doctor at the hospital told us that he would not be able to walk for the foreseeable future. The cause of the injury was that he had slipped on a protruding board and rolled down the slope of a boardwalk in the middle of the night as they stayed at a mountain lodge after climbing a mountain on a trip. He was reportedly intoxicated, and I couldn't help but question Edith sternly. "Mrs. Clapton, what in the world did you do to Abraham?" "We went to the mountains to watch a meteor shower in the night sky, sweetie. I thought it would be very romantic." A meteor shower in the mountains? You have noticed how Abraham's been limping and walking pretty slowly lately, I hope. And yet you bring him out on an outdoor trip to do crazy things like this? I can't help but wonder why. Oh dear, Kayla dear, you look so scary. You look like one of those old witches in horror movies that lure in travelers and devour them alive. You are just... I was furious with the irresponsible, infuriating Edith, and if it wasn't for Percy standing by my side to calm me down, I probably would have hit her right then and there.
Hey, come on now. This is a hospital. You'll inconvenience the other patients with that voice, Kayla.
I know. It's just...
Forget about it. We have a more pressing concern here. Now that Dad can't walk anymore for a while, at least, he needs help.
It was fairly obvious about what we should do. I took care of Mr. Clapton as much as I could while he was in the hospital, and by the time he was dismissed, we had decided to move in with him and his wife to take care of him at home. Mr. Clapton felt very responsible for disrupting my life, as he claimed, and said to me apologetically.
I'm sorry for the trouble I've caused you, Kayla. I didn't think I'd need any help for another while, as I didn't want to impose upon your kindness. But life can be so cruel at times.
Oh, please, Abraham, don't worry about it. You've taken such good care of me and Percy up until now, and this is my way of repaying you for your kindness. Let's do our best in the rehab, okay? Since I was working part-time, I brought in a helper and used a daycare that offered rehabilitation services for the time that I wasn't home to do everything myself. Edith wasn't particularly happy about the additional services her husband was using for his recovery and often complained to me about it. Using social services to get him better is a waste of money, Kayla, and I didn't give permission to use such services to begin with. It was Abraham himself that signed the contracts for the social services, Mrs. Clapton. Perhaps he thought he needed all the help he can get. He's managing everything, and he's using his own money to pay for everything. He doesn't need your permission. A waste of money, is it? What are you talking about? Pray tell, I wonder what you consider Abraham as. A husband, I hope, and not some nuisance or obstacle. Shut up! Just shut up! It wasn't supposed to be like this. Edith was less than useless when it came to taking care of Mr. Clapton. She was adamant on the fact that she was not going to phase in this carefree attitude and help out in bringing him back to health. She started going out day and night, leaving the care of her own husband to me and the helpers that stopped by every day for a few hours. Mr. Clapton called me over one day and said to me with a taciturn tone of voice,
When I married Edith, my dear, it felt amazing. I felt like I was young again, and I was having a wonderful time together with her. But I realized her selfishness far too late. I had misjudged her.
Hearing his words and considering his past, what with his first wife passing away so early in life, I felt sad myself. One more reason why his words made me sad and pensive was because it was around that time that my marriage with Percy began to deteriorate as well. My husband started coming home from work much later than usual and started working overtime, and the opportunities of talking to each other became more and more scarce. And that wasn't all. He would often come home with the same smell of women's perfume lingering about him, and even when he was home, all he would do was look at his phone and smile at the screen. And there was something else. One day, when I was cleaning out my husband's bag that had been left unattended, I saw a wrapped gift case in it. It had the logo of a famous brand of women's accessories printed on it, and while a part of me suspected Percy was cheating on me, I made myself hope it was just a gift of appreciation after some business. Or perhaps a gift to his younger sister Veronica, who had just recently moved back into town after living abroad for close to 15 years. I thought about questioning Percy about his true intentions of buying such a thing, but he was still helping out and taking care of his father, and I didn't want to add to the already evident conflict in the house. So, I took the plunge and hired a professional investigator to look into the probable affair. One day, while I was working part-time, I received a phone call from the helper who was on duty that day. She sounded extremely panicked and scared, and I could immediately tell something had happened. "Mr. Clapton had an allergic reaction and is being taken to the hospital as we speak, ma'am." "Oh my gosh, is he okay?" "Okay, I'll be right there." Mr. Clapton has a severe allergy to shellfish, enough that even soup made with broth from shrimp or crab would kill him, so we had to be careful with his meals. The helper who made his lunch every day knew that, and she assured me that there was no shellfish in the fridge. I rushed to the hospital, relieved to find that Mr. Clapton had been given medication and his symptoms had improved completely. The helper who was accompanying him told me that it was Edith who had made him lunch that day. She said she had wanted to make it herself, so she left Edith to her cooking and went upstairs to clean Mr. Clapton's room. "I was cleaning his room when I heard something odd coming from downstairs. He quickly climbed down the stairs and saw him beginning to swell up. He was moaning for help, and it was far too evident that he was in a lot of pain." "What the hell? What happened to Edith?" "She had already gone out and wasn't answering her phone when I was literally spam calling her, ma'am. He was getting in more and more pain, so I called an ambulance." To my great surprise, Edith had gone out while her own husband's life was in danger. I called her several times, and when she finally picked up, I yelled at her. "Edith, where the hell are you? Abraham is in trouble. What on earth did you feed him?" "You were nagging me to take care of him, so I thought I'd make him a meal for once. I thought it was the least I could do, since I knew he liked my cooking, and I made him his favorite fried rice. Why do you have to frickin' yell at me, eh? Along with the rice, I just served him a salad from a convenience store." "You know Abraham has allergies, and we have to be careful with everything. The dressings in those box salads sometimes have crab or shrimp extract in them, Edith, and that alone could be disastrous." "I'm just done. I can't take care of him like this," she snapped before hanging up the phone. Mr. Clapton, who was lying on his bed listening to this transaction, became completely depressed and instantly seemed to age 10 or 20 years. I became more worried about him than angry at Edith, and focused my energy on consoling him. I consulted with his doctor and asked for a prescription of medicine to be used in the event of another such incident, so that we would be prepared in case of an emergency. However, after this event, I began to notice changes in Mr. Clapton's behavior, and it wasn't good news at all. He started forgetting things more and more often, and began saying things that didn't add up to reality at all. I would cook lunch for him, and he would not even touch it, and instead he would say something like, "Oh, wait a second, I just ate dinner, didn't I? Whose food is this?" Sometimes he would just completely forget what he'd just eaten, and Edith would scoff at him and say, "He's completely lost his mind, you know. He can't even remember what he just ate a few seconds ago. Stupid gas bag." "Edith, please don't talk like that." Mr. Clapton seemed to quickly cheer up whenever people said kind words to him, and he never did anything violent, so I thought he was suffering from a mild form of dementia. But gradually, his dementia seemed to be progressing, and he started to have these intermittent outbursts of yelling nonsensical things from time to time.
"Oh my God. Everyone, run away! Run away from this house!"
"Oh, Abraham, it's all right. You're just having another laugh as usual, dear. You're so funny. LOL. I tried to calm him down by acting as if nothing was wrong and that everything was all right. But Percy and Edith would cast cold glares and colder words at both me and Mr. Clapton.
Could you shut the frick up, you old gas bag? You've lost your damn mind.
Can't you just put him in a nursing home? Yes, I suppose that's a good idea. I'd rather have professionals take care of him than have him treated so coldly and cruelly in his own house. Percy and Edith are both such incurable hypocrites because while it was them that implied we put Mr. Clapton in a home, they both protested the idea when I agreed to it.
Hey, now, wait a damn minute. Just how much do you think all that will friggin' cost? Nursing homes aren't free. We're gonna lose a good deal of his legacy at this pace.
I agree. I'm having a lot of trouble paying my bills because of this senile old man. I had grown tired of their selfishness and their constant complaining, and I became more and more suspicious of both of them having a strange affinity for being greedy. If that's how you both feel, then you let him stay in this house and help take care of him. This is his home where he raised you, Percy, and where he welcomed you, Edith.
It's precisely why it's his house that we're letting you take care of him in, ain't it?
That's right. You're not entitled to any inheritance, and all you can do is take care of him to just maybe get a slice. Those were the most ridiculous words I'd ever heard in my life. I had my suspicions about the increasing number of times these two bastards mentioned the word inheritance. Edith, in particular, had put Mr. Clapton in danger on not one, but two separate occasions. I also felt that Percy was also not trustworthy. The reason for this was that I had received the results of the investigation of my husband's affair from the detective agency. I found out that he was having an affair with a woman who was a junior employee at his workplace, and that he was paying a considerable amount of money to her. I was more concerned about Mr. Clapton, who knew nothing about the fact that his son was cheating on his wife and that his life might be in constant danger. One Friday, I was shopping for groceries for the lunches and dinners on Saturday and Sunday. As I was browsing the supermarket, I caught a glimpse of Edith. Thinking about feeding my father-in-law was quite important on Fridays, since both the Helper Dispatch Organization and the daycare center were closed on the weekends. She was in the fish section, putting frozen shrimp and crab in her shopping basket. I was immediately taken aback and stood still with shock. As soon as she finished her shopping, she quickly left the supermarket. I hurried back home, only to find that Mr. Clapton was not there. The helper on duty that day was waiting for me to come home. "Well, Mr. Clapton has gone out with his wife, ma'am. They had a reservation at a restaurant today, and they are having dinner over there tonight." She went on to show me a certain letter Mr. Clapton had left us. When I read the name of the restaurant, I was relieved. It was a restaurant that he had frequented for decades, and he was personally very good friends with the head chef, who knew about all of his allergies. The helper then gave me another letter telling me she was forbidden from opening, and that she was to give it to me directly. She then packed up her bag, bid me goodnight, and left. I opened the letter, which was just a folded piece of notepad. The helper had retrieved it from the living room by the telephone. I unfolded the piece of paper and read pretty much the same words that Mr. Clapton sometimes shouted out loud in his outbursts.
"Run away from this house!"
Remembering Edith's shellfish shopping spree, I opened the kitchen cupboard where his medicine was supposed to be, only to find the bag of EpiPens gone. In its place was yet another letter, but this one had apparently been written in advance, and it was written in my father-in-law's beautiful handwriting. It really didn't seem possible that he was suffering from dementia as of then, because it was as polite and well-written as always. And this is what it read.
"Kayla, my dear, if you are reading this letter, I assume you are still at home. You must listen to me. Run. Run away to a safe place. Immediately! I have the EpiPens, so I can protect myself in the event of an emergency. My son and wife are working together on something terrible. They want to harm us, maybe even kill us. You need to contact this lawyer as soon as possible and tell him everything you know. He'll know exactly what to do. Don't worry."
My father-in-law kept this letter in a cupboard in case I didn't believe the first message. As I mentioned, it was in a particular cupboard where we kept his EpiPens. If you don't know what those are, they're a thin syringe shaped like a pencil that injects epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, which is a hormone that counteracts allergic reactions. It was precisely what we needed in case of anaphylaxis, which is a life-threatening allergic reaction, and only my father-in-law and I knew where we kept them. I decided to follow what Mr. Clapton's letter said. Then, I heard the front door open quietly. Someone had entered the house with stealthy footsteps. I quickly hid in a tall, narrow closet. Someone looked into the kitchen and then into the living room. I peeked out from the shadows and saw a man of similar height and build to Percy, wearing a black coat with a baklava hat covering his face, and holding what looked like a rope in his hand. My teeth chattered and rattled with fear, but I forced my feet to move, strode to the kitchen door, opened it quietly, and ran out at once. Behind me, I heard a voice that sounded a lot like my husband's calling for me. I didn't dare turn around and kept running barefoot. That must have been my husband. What was he going to do to me? What was he going to do to me? I don't remember how long I ran, but by the time I got to a busy sidewalk near downtown, the soles of my feet were beginning to peel off completely, and I had developed bleeding blisters. I was still shaking, but I called the number Mr. Clapton had given me, the one of his lawyer, and told him what had just happened, and he immediately came to pick me up in a cab. I was worried about Mr. Clapton, but according to the lawyer, he was already in the hospital receiving treatment, and his condition was stable. Just as I feared, he'd gone into anaphylactic shock after eating a few bites of food at the restaurant, but he was able to inject himself with an EpiPen on the spot and survive the reaction. His allergies had been thoroughly addressed by the restaurant owner and the head chef, both of whom Mr. Clapton knew well personally. But somehow, the shrimp and crab broth had gotten mixed in with the food. The restaurant staff, at his request, went through Edith's belongings and found a small bottle in her bag containing that container of shrimp and crab broth that had probably been heated in a microwave. A security camera also showed her adding the broth from the bottle to his food. My father-in-law went to the hospital as a precaution, and after the restaurant called the police, Edith was arrested on charge of assault. According to Mr. Dotville, Mr. Clapton's lawyer, my father-in-law had become suspicious of his wife after she put him in harm's way and asked a detective agency to investigate her behavior. In order to gather more evidence, he had pretended to have dementia in order to catch his wife off guard. The investigation revealed that Percy and Edith were working together to harm us both. Edith had mixed in an ingredient to which he was allergic in his food, and he wanted to catch her red-handed by eating the contaminated food, knowing she had poisoned it. Mr. Dotville then told me about a conversation he had with my mother-in-law that was recorded to prove that Percy and Edith were in cahoots. It was a truly horrifying conversation. I saw you go into a hotel room with a young woman the other night.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Don't play dumb with me, Percy. Look here. I even took a photograph of you two stupid lovebirds. You know that if word got about your little affair, and Kayla finds out, she'll divorce you and demand you a huge bunch of alimony, right? I'm willing to negotiate a price to keep my mouth shut.
Look, listen. She's pregnant, and I have a lot of responsibility for raising the baby.
By which you mean? She sounded pretty darn sarcastic, making me realize how good a manipulator Edith truly was.
Give me a break, woman. I need all the money I have so that I can at least give them both a decent life.
You think you need a break? I'm also up to here with this stupid, boring-ass life of mine, all because your frickin' geezer of a father is strict on me and won't give me any money to spend. Not to mention that frickin' hag, your wife, has her hands all over my wallet too.
We'll find a way to still get more money, Edith. I know we will. That old man still makes so much money. And he also doesn't even remember what he ate after 10 minutes. What with the dementia and all? It's going to be easy to take his bacon now. How about we do what you did the other night and give him an allergy?
That's a good idea. But you still cheated on your wife. And you're gonna have to pay alimony, even if the old man disappears.
Kayla's so freaking serious. She could theoretically do the job on her own like herself after having a brutal phase of nursing depression.
That's good. That's good. I provided this recording to the police, and they brought my husband in for being an accessory to Edith's crime. According to the police, the man in the black coat who broke into our house that day, targeting me, was indeed Percy. I was staying at a business hotel that my lawyer had arranged for me, and when my husband's arrest assured me I was going to be safe, I called my children and told them what had happened. The children were very surprised at first, then immediately turned furious. After Mr. Clapton was discharged from the hospital, he divorced Edith and severed his ties with Percy through Mr. Dotville. Meanwhile, I divorced Percy and filed a claim for alimony against him and the woman whom he was having an affair with. But after being investigated for crimes in his workplace, he was fired from his job, and it was thus unlikely that he would be able to pay me the alimony. He was later convicted with a suspended sentence, and since he came back to work, he has been working part-time and living in poverty. The woman whom he was having an affair with had also left the company and is no longer in contact with him. No one knows if she bore the child or if she decided to get rid of it. Mr. Clapton regretted his remarriage and paid me compensation as a genuine apology for the harm and discomfort his wife and son had caused me. After that, he moved into a nursing home that he had contracted himself and is now working hard to rehabilitate his injured legs and hips. He's made steady improvement, and as of now, he is no longer in need of a wheelchair. A walker sufficed, and even that is becoming more and more unnecessary. I'm so glad to see Mr. Clapton recover quickly, back to his old, charming self. After my divorce with Percy, I contemplated keeping in contact with Mr. Clapton, because while he himself is such a sweetheart, talking to him could potentially bring back some trauma from when Percy attempted to hang me with a rope that fateful night. I eventually decided against becoming incognito, because he was nonetheless a very important grandfather to my children. So, I rented an apartment within walking distance of the nursing home he moved into, so that I could take care of him and run errands for him. I convinced my parents that I would continue to take care of my ex-father-in-law after the divorce. So I decided not to move back to my parents' house after the whole thing with the legalities. I found a part-time job near my apartment and turned over a new leaf. I will decide for myself how to live my life from now on, and I hope I will always do what I think is right and walk on the right path towards retirement and beyond.